So I'm just apologizing in advance because I have a lot of filler words. Um, that's one of them. Um, but etc. 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 There's a lot, and it kind of just takes up space. And I also talk very slowly. Like I say in a second, I don't have a script, and I think I also need to build on my confidence when I'm speaking. But regardless of that, I hope that this video can still be of use. So that's all. Since I started posting more, I noticed that there's a lot of really cool people that make tutorials, and also a lot of people that are out there hoping to learn. And I feel like I kind of went back to the basics and stuff. So that's taking too long. This is unscripted. So let's say you're an intermediate artist like me, and maybe you didn't learn all the things that you felt that you were supposed to at the beginning. You just kind of moved around and did whatever. That's kind of what I did. And I didn't necessarily start with the basics. I just kind of learned them whenever, and I don't know if they really stuck with me. So I went back to kind of think about a lot of things, especially regarding storytelling. Don't worry about the storytelling stuff as much if you are not interested in that. But it is a great tool for illustration in general. So, um, I think I'm just gonna get into it, and hopefully this will help beginners. But these might be too complex for beginners. It's been a long time for me, so it might not be for you if you're more so a beginner. But still listen anyways because there potentially it could help you. I also come out the door and say that I have problems visualizing a lot. I really struggle to visualize, even though a lot of my works just come out of my imagination. So getting things to be accurate is quite difficult for me. So I have broken this down into like 3 sections, and basically um this is kind of what I had for me as reminders, but I'm gonna explain this so that other people can use this as well. Um, Now, the first section is the process, generally speaking, because mine tends to change sometimes, as I'm sure other people's do. The next part here is rules, and I think these rules are some of the building blocks basically to creating something more. It is kind of fundamental. And then finally here I have some some extra things to remember when you maybe get confused or need some priorities aside from those. Okay, that's the way that I kind of look at those. They're enhancing things, you know. So we're gonna start off at the very top here. We're gonna start with the first one here, which is observe. Now, um, it's kind of general. You could also call it establish. The important thing here is starting to figure out your idea. So, something that I heard recently, which is really important, especially regarding references, is about decision making. With art, you are making a lot of small decisions, and sometimes it's very conscious, and sometimes it's subconscious. So, for example, if you are in advance picking out your palette, you might be putting a lot more thought into it. But typically, like if you are just laying down your strokes as an intermediate artist, you probably don't think as much about it. I'm editing right now, and I realized that I forgot to add a few points here. And I think that while you're making art, you are like constantly in a decision making process. And so another part of observe, which can even be like part of your prep stage here, is honestly just doing thumbnail sketches. I don't do them as often as I should, but they have been pretty helpful to me, because it it goes in depth with your decision making process. So while you're kind of looking at your thumbnails, you already have multiple ideas kind of like sketched out, or even you're kind of exploring your vision, right? And you can pick which you want to proceed with, and that really saves you a lot of the time and effort, um, than like making a decision on a whim and then having to alter that decision constantly later while you're making your piece. Because been there, done that, and that really gets in kind of in your own way in the long run. It's not a bad thing to start experimenting in the middle of a piece. That is a great thing to do, but when it comes to decision making fatigue, because that is a thing that I learned about a little while ago, and I was so surprised. But when it comes to decision making fatigue, you want to prioritize your decisions, and make them as smooth and and like not like as not tiring as they can be. You want to remove how tiring it can be and just make it smooth for yourself. Whatever works for you best, generally speaking. Um so for observe, right? This is figuring things out. So let's say I have a reference that I want to use. I need to break down the reference. Like, let's say there's a already drawn one, an already drawn out reference photo of a post. Okay, the artist made all the decisions for me already. So, unless there are certain things that I want to change, there's not as much thinking as like a live sort of photo, you know, like a photo from real life. So then I have to observe and make a lot of decisions, in the next processes. Okay, so take this with a grain of salt because they are two different um, images overall. But I did use a photo from real life, and then I used a photo of a sketch where someone already made decisions to interpret it into something more digestible as a reference. And so I used both of them, and the sketch that the person already made the decisions for took me less time, and I was fucking up a lot. So basically, though, the reason I was fucking up a lot more is I think because I didn't fully grasp everything. Like, it was much easier for me to get it done quicker, but I still don't think that I learned that much because the way that the person uses guidelines is different than how I like to use guidelines. So near the end of that one, I just started doing my own thing and was like, all right, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm gonna do my own thing. Now, the other one, I just decided from the get go what I was doing here. I blocked out my shapes. So I started with the carve slash block and the mapping part first, actually, which I'll go on to explain that these are all like interchangeable steps. But I did that, and then I kind of went in there with my vision or whatever. I think there's some preference involved too. Like, do you want to be making the decisions today and trying to maybe learn more independently? Or are you just trying to get your idea down? Like, efficiency versus learning. That's what I learned through this experiment. So please experiment yourself and give it a try. So observe is kind of decision based, but it it is also kind of figuring out the bigger picture, the shapes and the details. It depends what works for you. I think for me it's mostly just I have this idea, right? I have this idea that I want to maybe draw my character, and in in my bones, in my head or whatever, I already know what kind of shapes that character has in their design that I'm going to be working with. And so um we kind of go on to the next step. All right. Let's say I'm drawing one of my characters. All right. I picked the pose and I'm a character, and so I'm going to go into the next step. Um Kind of observe kind of goes throughout. But anyways, this is the more practical part of it, right? Carving and blocking things out. So it depends for me, because personally I find that blocking things out is um kind of messier, but it also makes things much easier for me to understand with the bigger picture part of observe. Now, when I'm carving things out, um I guess I guess it's the reverse, the opposite of block, but I have a much more difficult time because I get caught up in details for sure when I'm just carving things out. Um but generally it's getting the shapes down. Whether you're starting to block out a silhouette or something, right? I find that helpful sometimes. Or sometimes I just want to go in and start sketching just using lines rather than like one big blob or something. So this also kind of goes hand in hand with map, because that's why this line is right here, because these two are kind of interchangeable um steps, because sometimes I do my mapping after, sometimes I do my mapping before, or I go back and forth. But mapping would basically be like your planning. A lot of people, they get their planning done beforehand. I think that changing up the process, seeing what works, um, kind of helps me like piece by piece, and also to understand better like what I want to do and what my strengths are with that. So by picking like, okay, which step am I going to start with here? That's another decision to make. Sure, I might even do just the circle with the guidelines, for the head, and that would be mapping, right? Your guidelines and your mapping, like that's kind of planning stuff. But you can also do it throughout to check that things are correct. So maybe I just drew a hand and I'm like, this doesn't seem right. Let me break it down and look at all the shapes. And this again goes back into observe. Like, let me double check and look at my stuff here as I'm going. I'm also realizing that carving and mapping seem almost like the same thing, but I think that the main difference is definitely intent. Mapping has a lot more intent to me than carving things out. So I'm carving out shapes, I'm just like going, oh look, there's a shape. There's a shape. There's a pattern or a thing there. And then when I'm doing mapping, I'm usually trying to understand something better or kind of lay down a plan. Um, right? Like this list is not necessarily always linear. Okay, this list is constantly interacting right here. Uh, and it, I guess steps, I've been referring to it as steps, but it's just kind of pieces of the process. I think I meant to put this down here. That's all right. Because part of mapping is kind of correcting things, but especially refining it is also correcting. After this would be basically like your rendering process, um, or any like tweaks that you need to make. Okay, so that's basically like your first category. So I'm gonna go down to the next category, which I would basically call this like fundamentals. To me, these are the most important, but this is not all of the fundamentals. So it's really important to like go find what's the most important to you. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I think that these are my takeaways for what helps me the best. One of the most important things is definitely light defines form. So now, whenever I go into my drawings, I always try and consider the way that light will affect my line art. It depends how you do your stuff, but light will always affect form and line art. So, with the absence of it, you have shadow, and those things define all of the things that you can see. It basically creates the depth. It is the line. Because if you look at anything in front of you, lines, like they are in art, they don't you look the same as reality, especially if you think about cartoons, anime or things like that. They don't reflect reality because like real life doesn't exactly have lines. It's just about light and the absence of it that creates form. So you look down, let's say, at your hand, and most of the actual lines is just made up with light and shadow. Um which that is something that your line art will define. So anyways, light and shadow in your line art basically can increase the accuracy of your line art and the way that it looks. It's giving it depth. So when you're doing your line art, you think about, okay, what is where's the light source? Not just with your coloring, because I used to think only with my coloring about light. That was a basically afterthought because I had already done my line art and my sketch. But line art is one of the main definers, setting that up. That's planning before your colors. Think about where it's darker, your lines are going to be thicker, and then your lines are going to be lighter, thinner at the parts that are affected by light. This I would say it's a little bit different with bounce lighting. Here, I'm just gonna show a couple images about bounce lighting because I was like, what is that? But this is also another important thing to learn, which is why I was like, I don't know if this is for beginners necessarily. Um, but that's something I'm not gonna cover. So, okay, because this will lead me into distance defines scale. So, when things are closer to us, they are larger, and there's actually, I think, more space, less detail. And when things are far away, there's more detail and less space, which sounds weird because when you look so far away, it's like, oh, but that's all the way over there, you know? Like you would think that you would be able to observe more detail in things that are close, which is true. Um, you do notice more things that are closer to you, but it's because I think there's so much overwhelming detail when things are far away. There's more being put into your vision that you're going to only pick out so many things in all that detail. Because detail will always be overwhelming, okay? Look at anything and just move forward to it and look at it. Or, like, if you just want to use your hand, that's fine. And you do see a lot of details, but do you notice that you're only focused on a small detail and there's so much space, like, around, right? And then you move it away. You're not as focused on the details, but it's still there. All the details are still there, but there is less space of your hand, right? The detail is taking up all that space. Like, say, between the lines of your hands, okay? There's lines or whatever on your palm. you can see between those lines when it's close up. When it's far away, you don't see all the little lines. You see less, basically. But the detail is there. So creating the illusion of distance involves not downscaling your detail as it moves far away. You need to keep that detail for the illusion of distance, basically. And so when it's close up, you want to have more space, basically. Texture. Okay, we're gonna get into texture. Texture defines identity. This one, I don't know how to phrase it any other way right now. But texture basically will give something identity. So, for example, okay, we're gonna use a hand again. Um, you have the texture of skin on your hand. It's not like this occurs that much in art, but uh, commonly for the sake of time, right? Like, say, animation or something, you don't want to have to animate that, so it doesn't really show up. But your skin does have texture, and so usually it's kind of defined by being smooth in art, right? And the way that that occurs is just smooth shading usually, or if you have cell shading, um, it's showing kind of just the shadows across the skin. And then when you are drawing hair, you definitely have texture in your line art to define your hair, especially in the way that you are shading it. So it can be stylized quite a lot, but so you're communicating the texture that is hair, defining it is different from skin. So what if you get into something like you put the texture of tree bark on a hand? What does that change instead of leaving it smooth? Well, the hand is a tree. So what does that tell you? Okay, then this is not a human. The texture is like bark, so it's like a tree hand. Or there's like a person that's like a plant or something, right? That's what it tells you. Or something, I don't know, it depends on the context. But you get what I mean with that. Is texture will define the identity of specific aspects of your piece. And I think the most important one is clarity equals communication. You want your art to be clear so that whatever you are communicating gets across to the viewer. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily symbolic. So, say that you want to make art that highlights like the symbolism of like water being cleansing or something. So you have someone like in the water, like drenched, like being clean. Kind of like that one um part of Blue Eye Samurai where she's like in the water and all this stuff is going on and it like goes over her and it kind of like is like, okay, rebirth. That's symbolism and they communicated that. But it was clear that she was in water. You have to make certain choices to make sure that what you are illustrating is going to be understood. So one thing I definitely had issues with is tangent lines. Uh Sometimes you can really get away with them, but if you're not careful, the way your lines overlap, intersect with certain things in your drawing will actually ruin your clarity. I'm gonna leave two articles about tangents in the description with a lot of great examples of tangents in case you need a better understanding. Some people are gonna get caught up with, I'm very confused. That happens to me a lot in manga, where I'm reading a manga and it's a fight scene, and I don't blame the authors that much. It's actually quite difficult to illustrate action, like crazy ass action scenes in manga. But I'll be looking at it and I'm like, I genuinely can't tell what's going on. I don't know what's this from that. confusing, like where are they going, like I don't understand. So when you create things, you need to recognize that like you're telling something. You're telling something. Even if you're not, you're telling something, you know? So that's why clarity is very important in all forms of illustration. Even a lack, if you have a lack of clarity, it should be intentional, because that is an important part of communication. Learning how to communicate with the viewer, okay? Okay, so for the final section, these are things that I think are just important to keep in mind sometimes. Line of action leads the eye. So if you create an illustration, sometimes you really want to think like, where do I want them to look? So this is also really important with contrast creates interest, okay? This will add into this. They feed into each other a little bit. And your line of action too is kind of just is kind of creating movement. Movement always draws the eye. So that's important. Space and your darks versus your lights also draws the eye, which darks versus lights, that's contrast. So I would say action and contrast in space kind of interacting, these things draw the eye. So when you're creating your illustrations, the interaction between all these things are important, okay? I'm only using a mouse. For this one I will show an example. So the dragon's head's coming down, they got the claws gripping on the thing here. Okay. The wings are out of focus, but okay. So the dragon's looking down. All right, let's see. I lost my mouse. Okay. And right here we're gonna have like a building or a stone thing or whatever, like a pillar maybe. Okay, this line too drags your eyes down. So as you can see right now, all of these things are dragging your eyes down because you want to look at the face. The neck's going down. These lines are going up and down. That's leading your eye. Okay, and then there's the bottom of the pillar or whatever. And then what do we want the dragon to look at? Okay, maybe there's a little person like looking up here. Maybe a little babushka. Okay, babushka's looking up at the dragon. She's got her shawl, baggy pants, and little boots. There we go. So she's looking up at the dragon. This creates a connection here, right here. Your eyes they go up and down between the two. There's a connection there between them. They notice each other, right? That's important. Now, something else that's important about this, okay? Because we kind of have our line of action. They're looking at each other. There's a line, okay? That would be our line of action. So next, we want to talk about space and contrast. We have all this empty space right here. What are we gonna do with it? We could do some framing, you know? I'm going to do this like monochrome. So, because we want to think, what are we trying to draw attention to? Now, for let's just say like a comic book or whatever, this is our foreground, okay? We have our foreground, and then we kind of have our middle-ish ground right here. We can kind of have like some mountains, but I'm thinking I'm gonna just darken a little bit. Yeah. Okay, cool. Do I like that? I feel like they should frame the image a little more. Yeah, cool. Um, we're gonna go a bit darker. That's our background. Okay, do you see the vision? Do you see the vision? Potentially, potentially, you can even maybe put a sun or a moon. What if you put it? Oops, wait. We're gonna we're gonna use the ellipse tool and fill that bad boy in. Okay. Okay. So you could put it down here. You could put it up here. Personally, I think it looks kind of interesting right here because we fill in. Ooh. I don't know. I like how we fill in this kind of empty space a little bit. Cause in my mind, when I'm looking at this, I go like my eyes go like this. Oops. Hold on. I will actually draw it out. That's where my eyes go, and it kind of leads you down. It kind of leads you down. That's my example of how, right? You have the contrast, right? Background, middle ground, foreground, um, creating that interest, okay? Which you could even do it the other way. It depends on your lighting, right? And then you have your line of action, okay? And you have this space. We have that open space, and we're like, it's kind of empty, it's not helping, so let's fill in. I just put a moon in there. Sometimes you might want to leave the space open. It depends what you prefer. That was my choice there, kind of show what time it is as well in the background. These are also kind of important things right here, like more so for storytelling. And I think there's basically the big three. Everything that I hear when I'm listening to what's important about making a successful story through illustration, it's communication, timing, and flow. So again, we went over communication. That's really important, even more so with storytelling, because again, what you're communicating, you want it to be clear. Okay? Timing. So as you're reading, that's another important thing. And that more so goes into movement. Is it stagnant or dynamic? That's the sort of thing that draws you into the illustration. And finally, flow. Flow is like the way things sew together, things kind of ebb together. It's kind of like a river, okay? You're going down a certain direction, or like a path, and that's kind of something to think about with flow, is like the direction and how well things kind of go together. That kind of links into other things, but it depends on, again, your intentions, but those things can definitely help. Something I find too is with my loose sketches, things where I'm like willing to, now at an intermediate stage, exaggerate and break some rules. Kei Orana's art is a really great inspiration regarding flow. As you're looking at these pieces, like, do you notice the flow? The flow kind of goes hand in hand with line of action a lot of the time, but it leads you along to how you process things in what you're seeing. So the flow in here is definitely very clear, and it's not stiff. All right, finally, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's kind of what I had to figure out with the illustration that I was just doing here. Okay. Who? Dragon and Babushka. Where are they? I don't know, but they're kind of out in the wilderness here. There's like a pillar. What's going on? They're looking at each other. That's what they're looking down. They notice each other. When? Potentially night, because it's very dark in the background, I think. And how? How did they get to this point? And that's interesting because that kind of opens up a story, or even why. Like, those things kind of open up a story. How and why are they here? And that's really fun part of illustration to me. I think I'm also going to add in here that one thing that can really enhance your illustration is thinking about the story, because a lot of my old drawings didn't really have much going on. I was exploring a concept, not a scene. Both of those are fine things, but I think when you create some sort of scene, something happening where if there's a character, the character is interacting with something, or something in the environment almost seems dynamic, it creates something more interesting to the eye than something that would be stagnant. So that's another decision. Stagnant or dynamic, both are fine. Anyways, so that's kind of me going over these things that I find important and that I went back to kind of go over and learn and remind myself. But I think there's only so much that I can say. I'm gonna recommend just a couple books. You Will Be Able to Draw by the End of This Book by Jake Spicer. I got this when I was really younger. I got this book when I was a lot younger, and when I first used it, I felt like genuinely, I was like, I'm seeing things in a new way and I'm improving. And I look back now and I'm like, there's a lot of basics in here. If you are a beginner, use this. Okay? Use this book. Very good. Now, I will say, I when I went back, I didn't find as many things helpful, but I did think there's actually some things I can take away from here, because the author articulates things very well. There's some methods I kind of forgot about, and it would be great for me to go back through it to kind of learn how to, go and look at things in life and try and draw them. It's very good for practicing. There are pages within it to allow you to take a hands-on approach and literally do what the author's explaining about. And this author has multiple books, but this is the only one I've seen. But if they're all like this, then I think they would be quite helpful, because you can literally go and draw right in it and look back at your examples, and I think that's great. So that's my first recommendation. This one I would recommend for more intermediate artists like me, because if you've already been going for a while, you're gonna feel like this one is really repetitive, especially like regarding things you might have just learned in school, if you took art classes in school. But for this book, I saw things in a new way. Now, listen, Andrew Loomis, I don't really know anything about that guy, but I've heard about the Loomis method, and I know this author has multiple books. So, I will say this is pretty old school. Like, I went through and I was like, you can tell, like, certain things regarding the period of the time. It's an old book, so be prepared, because it's very old school, especially in the way that they kind of try and translate that to what was modern at the time. Anyway, I do think, though, that this book is really good for kind of refreshing on basics and learning more, because this is not like what I was taught in school, and it even gets, I would say, they literally bring up formulas at certain points for art, which I have a little bit of a difficult time grasping fully, but I still think it's very, very intelligent, and a lot of people would really benefit from going over this at least once, because honestly, So one of the most helpful parts in this book, I think, for me too, is regarding composition, because there's so many great compositions and going into detail about that. Um, but there's just a lot in here that very helpful with fundamentals. But yeah, I think those are my two book recommendations. If you have other book recommendations, please share them. I would very much appreciate that, especially regarding storytelling. But yeah, that's kind of the end of my, I don't know, this tutorial, but all right. Anyway.